Hey everybody, going to keep this one short and sweet. Um, I've been doing some reflecting around one of the major conversations that we're seeing in not just the masculinity space, but also in the wider societal zeitgeist, which is the manosphere. At the time of recording, inside the manosphere has kind of gone hyper viral. There's lots of conversations, lots of takes, lots of perspectives that are filling the internet. I've added a few of mine in as well, um, in other platforms and other spaces. But this episode today is really for me focusing on what comes next. Because for me, at the time of recording, um, a lot of the conversations that we have in response to Watershed Media and the conversations that follow from it is, well, this is shocking. This is really like distressing. This is really stressful. This is really concerning. And then the conversation kind of stops there. Conversation stops. Wow, this is awful. Okay, we've seen this new series though. This series is cool. It's kind of what it feels like. And I know, and I'm naming my own sort of proximity here as someone that works in a space that sees a lot of what this documentary speaks to, and also what things that adolescents speak to. I recognize that I've got an increased proximity to most people in the space. And my opinions and my ideas come from that proximity, right? But when I'm thinking about what's next, what is really important for me is that we really focus on sustaining conversations and reflections because it's relatively easy to start conversations and reflections. The real skill set for me is found in how we sustain it. And when I think about the conversations that adolescents started, I was watching, okay, we're kind of going in the right direction, but also there's a lot of fragility around what this was unearthing. And at times that fragility superseded the reality of what it was speaking to or making reference to. And as a result of that, the approach and the way of approaching slightly changed. It became more about we're demonizing boys instead of let's actually explore the context that surrounds what this show is talking to, i.e., violence against women and girls, misogyny, sexism, the online spaces like the manosphere. Let's critically explore and examine those spaces and how they're all interlinked, how they're all feeding off of each other systemically and also culturally. Let's explore and examine that. We didn't do that because the polarity of those conversations, well, I think this and you think that, resulted in a lot of clash, and then the clash died down because something else took its place. Sustaining conversations in this regulation is massively important. And for me, when I think about what comes next in relation to conversations in discourse around the manosphere, we've been here before. We've been here at least 3 times in my career in this space. We've been here in relation to the first wave of manfluencers. What do we do? This is really concerning. What should we do next? Adolescents came around. What should we do next? This is really concerning. What should we do in this space? What comes next? This documentary's come out. Wow, this is really concerning. We're not quite sure how to approach this. What should we do next? And the conversation feels very similar each and every time because what we're not recognizing is that the question should be how do we sustain conversation and reflection instead of responding in the moment in the knee-jerkness of what we're seeing. That's really dysregulating. So I want to talk about that. That's really dysregulating. So I need to resurface my ideas and opinions. That's really dysregulating. I'm concerned and I'm worried about this. All valid feelings and experiences. But also, what's really important is that we think about how we sustain it. How do we reach people who might be in proximity to these ideas? How do we center those that are disproportionately targeted and impacted by the ideologies that the manosphere perpetuates and profits from? How do we make the links between the systemicness of misogyny, sexism, patriarchy, and those links towards capitalism? How the business model of exploitation, in my opinion, of preying on vulnerable people and capitalizing on that vulnerability to build a financial gain or build financial gain, but also normalizing harm towards women and girls. How do we make those links between patriarchy and capitalism? Those are the questions that we need to ask, but the questions that systemically and culturally we are petrified to answer and ask. Because to talk about patriarchy means we've got to think about our own proximity to those ideas. We've got to name something that we've done a really good job of pretending doesn't exist. We're naming something that we've done a really good job of passing off as a feminist fabrication as opposed to something that is culturally perpetuated and has been culturally perpetuated across time and space for multiple generations. Naming patriarchy, naming capitalism requires all of us to step in and reflect on our own proximity to these ideas, our own proximity to these belief systems. And as long as we keep saying it's only a handful of guys, it's only a handful of influencers, only a handful of people, we can excuse ourselves from the necessary reflective work that has to follow. So that for me is where this needs to go next. It's easy to start conversations. It is difficult to sustain them, and sustaining them requires us to look at ourselves as active participants to the cultural context we're existing within, but also directly and indirectly upholding. That for me is what comes next as men, but also as communities of people in proximity to these ideas and belief systems that we've been in many ways born and raised within. How do we do that? How do we reflect on that? How do we attune to these experiences? How do we recognize and hold multiple truths simultaneously? That for me is massively important when it comes to the next steps. So if you want to see some of my thoughts and my ideas about the documentary that I'm speaking to in this episode itself, it's like the Manosphere. I will link them in the description so you can kind of see my thoughts and ideas. But this isn't about what my thoughts and ideas are. It's about what we do next and some of the things that I've been actively thinking about and processing in terms of, well, what should we do next? This is very much a stream of consciousness. Like I said, I want to keep this one short this week just because there's been a lot of conversation, a lot of reflection, and I just want to add my hopefully succinct stream of consciousness. And as I say, I am adding and continually throwing up across my social platforms some of the things that are working and have worked for me over the years in terms of engaging men and boys in really difficult conversations. If you are interested in that, please check that out in your own time. And also, to shamelessly plug, it's not shamelessly plugging actually, proudly plugging my book, Masculinity is in Schools. I talk about, not necessarily the manosphere directly, but ways to engage young men and masculinity specifically in difficult conversations around their ideas and their experiences of masculinity. So if you want some of that stuff, those are the places to find it. But I want to keep this episode short this week. I want to keep this one to the point. This is what I'm thinking. This is where my current processing brain is at. If you find it useful and you want to share it with some people and you want to share it with peers in the space, please do. It helps me a lot. And yeah, if you want to check out some of my other content, I will make it available in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in and checking in. I will see you in a future episode very, very soon. Big, big blessings to you. And yeah, catch you in the next one. Bye bye.